Hey everybody, welcome back to an episode of the 3 Count. I'm War Machine MJ, and I'm here today to talk about Monday Night Raw from the 21st. No, the 22nd. My bad. Yeah, this isn't the usual site I use for notes. Anyway, let's go ahead and jump right on in. We started off with everybody's favorite WWE champion at this moment, Drew McIntyre, basically welcoming us to Championship Monday. Well, I think that's cheesy, so I'm going to call it Monday Night Raw Championship Edition. Anyway, he talked about defending his belt last week. Well, defending his belt on Monday Night Raw last week with R-Truth. You know, it's very brief, and he's basically looking forward to the future, and his future is Dolph Ziggler, who interrupted him, and basically drops the bombshell that he and his partner Bob Roode, who is currently locked out of country right now, were traded over to Monday Night Raw for AJ Styles. And the meat and potatoes of his feud is basically says nobody is happier than him to see McIntyre as champion. And the only reason why Drew McIntyre is champion is because of Dolph Ziggler. He talked about, well, he basically said he's the reason that McIntyre is back in WWE. He's the reason that McIntyre is champion. And he basically says, well, it's time you pay what you owe, or you give what you owe, you give me what I'm owed. Drew McIntyre goes, I apparently missed something. What exactly do I owe you? And so Ziggler basically wants a title match at Extreme Rules. Then Drew McIntyre said, well, you've become the one thing that you and I both hated, and that's an entitled jackass. And then he points out that Ziggler has been losing because he doesn't have anybody, namely McIntyre, to watch his back. So he questions whether or not Ziggler actually wants the match, but then he's just like, you know what? Screw it, I accept. Do it up. So that's been made official for Extreme Rules. Afterwards, and before we cut to commercial, Nia Jax goes out to ringside, grabs up a steel chair, gets into the ring, and sits on the chair throughout the commercial break. We come back from commercial break, and she's basically still in the ring and says she's going to hold the show in abeyance until she gets what she wants. And that's, well, that's a little justice, especially after last week. So, basically she called out the fact that Charlotte Flair got a championship match against Asuka on Championship Monday, even though Nia Jax lost to Asuka in two controversial matches. At Backlash, it was a double count out, and last week's Raw, she lost by a fast count. And before she can even continue her tirade, the 24/7 champion, R-Truth, comes out and makes his way to the ring. He's confused because he was supposed to face Akira Tozawa in a 24/7 championship match where the 24/7 rules were held in abeyance. And then proceeds to accuse her of being Akira Tozawa, or Akira Tozawa's really big ninja friend. And before Nia Jax could lay his ass out, Akira Tozawa appears at ringside with his army of ninjas, and they chase R-Truth to the backstage. cut back to Nia Jackson before she can get back on her rant or back on her soapbox. She's interrupted by Charlotte Flair. Um, Charlotte basically says that Nia Jax squandered her title shots and, well, basically dropped the ball. And it's just a whole back and forth where Nia Jax goes to the well of, oh, you get everything handed to you because you're Ric Flair's daughter, blah, blah, blah. And that uh, Charlotte hasn't beaten Nia Jax, and then saying, oh, Charlotte's been building her legacy by defeating, easy prey, blah, blah, blah. And then, of course, they get to scrapping, and during their scrap, apparently, Nia Jax had injured or provide some damage towards Charlotte's arm in kayfabe, because Nia Jax does come under fire for being unsafe worker, even though she's had a couple of accidents towards Kyrie and accidentally punched Becky in the face, which led to one of the most striking visuals we have seen in a long time. Next, we had a recap of the Anything You Can Do, I Can Do Better feud between Viking Raiders and Street Profits, which led to the Tag Team Championship match on Championship Monday between the Street Profits and Viking Raiders. Of course, before then, we got a promo between the two, basically saying the Viking Profits are not the NWO. They're not for life. They're for ever. And said even though they're good friends, they're still going to do whatever it takes because it is a business after all. Street Profits vow they're going to do whatever it takes to hold on to the belts. Viking Raiders vow that they're going to do everything they can to get the belts back. And then Ray Rowe punctuates this by saying, bring the smoke. So, they're all fired up. They start heading to the ring, and then the camera lingers on Zelina Vega, who just randomly strolls up in there. Yeah, this was a fantastic match. These guys threw everything they had at each other. Of course, Street Profits walked away, still champions, finally getting that W over the Viking Raiders, which had eluded them. Afterwards, there was a solid sign of sportsmanship as the Viking Raiders shook the hands of the champions and proceeded to walk out. Then the Street Profits were attacked by Angel Garza and Andrade, who had seemed to squash their beef, or their internal beef. Viking Raiders made the save, chased them off, and that's how we ended that segment. Next, we had Seth Rollins backstage, who was confronted by his disciples when they basically voiced their concerns, and Seth's like, "Easy, I got this, man. I got this." Then they show highlights of what's happened between Dominic Mysterio and Seth Rollins last week. And then we come back from commercial, and there's Seth Rollins in the same exact place, and he basically said, sometimes we're destined for roles that are not our choices. He said he didn't choose to be the Monday Night Messiah, and Rey Mysterio chose not to become a victim, or not to become a sacrifice. And Rollins says he accepted his role while Rey didn't. But he says now that Dominic's involved, whatever happens to Rey. Uh, Next, we had an interview with Charlotte Flair. She walked out of the trainer's room, and the question was asked, "Is the match postponed?" And Charlotte's like, "Blah blah blah. I'm a Flair. Blah blah blah. The match is not postponed." Well, then Charlie Caruso just so happens to turn to the right and start interviewing Zelina Vega in her camp. And Garza answers it. Of course, he's talking, giving his answer while low key trying to seduce Charlie Caruso. Zelina Vega then steps in and, well, she calls Charlie Caruso $2 Chuck, which that's great. And says now that the internal beef has been squashed, they're going to start gunning after the Raw Tag Team titles. Of course, Andrade then vowed that the belts were going to be theirs. Andrade is so underrated, man. Even his promos have a hint of malice within them. It's fantastic. Uh, Next, we had the Raw Women's Championship match as Asuka took on Charlotte. Not their best match, but pretty damn good. These two tore it up, just basically beating the holy hell out of each other. Towards the finish, Asuka then locks in the Asuka lock and forces Charlotte to tap out. Asuka finally getting a dominant win over Charlotte. Despite the several matches where they went back and forth, of course, Charlotte being the one to end Asuka's undefeated streak. At the point of celebration, Charlie Caruso was backstage interviewing Nia Jax, where all Nia Jax had to say about the victory was, "It'd be a shame if someone kicked the Queen while she was down." Next, we had, oh my God, we had such a fantastic promo by Edge, who basically talked about his match at Backlash, where the whole point of that was, it was the greatest wrestling match ever, but Randy Orton, you didn't prove anything. You didn't prove that you were better, because I dodged the RKO, but before you punted me, you kicked me in the plums. And he only did that out of desperation. Then he talked about how upset he was watching Randy Orton celebrate his victory, and he's just beating himself up over how things turned out. And then he starts insinuating something deeper within himself, because he said it's time to wake up a side of himself that's been dormant for way too long. So in my mind, I'm thinking, yeah, we're going to get Brood Edge back. Yeah. Be fake vampire Lost Boy guy. Yeah. But then he talks about how disgusted he was with Orton punting his legit best friend in the head last week, despite not being cleared to compete, despite not wrestling a match for 6 bloody years. And he says he's ready to sink to any level he wants or needs to, and he doesn't care about wins anymore. And he will basically make Orton regret being born. And basically, the tail end of his promo is he vows to resurrect the Rated R Superstar. Of course, if they really want to capitalize on this, which again I'm dope for it. If they really want to capitalize on this, immediately after this feud ends, they need to bring back Tony Chimmel. They need to bring him back as Edge's personal ring announcer. Because he's the one that really emphasized the rated R superstar part. Uh, then Randy Orton gets interviewed a little later on by Charlie, and Randy Orton just gave us a nature lesson about snakes who, when they're cornered, they will strike viciously and wildly. And he said he struck Edge and Christian to defend his family and livelihood, which doesn't make a wink of sense, but whatever, given that he did the exact same, given that Edge did the exact same thing a couple of months prior. And he says that he hopes Edge and Christian make a full recovery because he needs to stay away, because they need to stay away from him. Next, there was a Charlotte Flair promo where she basically talks about how she wasn't too happy to have lost, and then Nia Jax beat the hell out of her and basically worked over her arm. Next, we were going to have R-Truth defending his 24/7 championship until Bob Lashley and MVP beat the hell out of him and some ninjas while Akira Tozawa hid underneath the ring until it was all over. Afterwards, Akira Tozawa pins R-Truth to become the new 24/7 champion. Next, we had a Natalya promo, which I thought this promo was really stupid. Because it basically revealed the true mental state of Natalya, basically saying how, the women's division needs leadership because, all the big names aren't on top or aren't even here, the like. She has a special announcement planned, but she'll make it once she gets done with Liv Morgan. So they have this match, and it was cut very, very short. Alarmingly so that Liv Morgan took to Twitter over this one. Natalya gets the victory with the sharpshooter. And apparently the big announcement that was never made was that Natalya is aligning herself with Lana. Whoa. Next, there was a Big Show interview. Basically, he talked about, yeah, I came back last week to say hi to some friends, but on the other hand, I got to beat up some ninjas. When do I get to say that? But then he said, well, this week, I'm not here because of friends. I'm here to teach Randy Orton a lesson because while I may be the world's largest athlete, I'm leaving the world's largest athlete behind in the locker room because I'm going to go out there and show that I am still a cold, heartless, pissed off giant. And then, of course, Ric Flair styled and profiled his way to the ring before the commercial. Came back from commercial. Ric Flair is there to inaugurate Randy Orton as the greatest wrestler in the world. But he starts off by talking about what happened between Charlotte and Nia Jax. And basically said, woo, my daughter Charlotte, she's going to get her revenge when she's 100%, and you can bank on that. Woo, woo. Then he goes to talk about Randy Orton. Says he's he's one of the greatest performers in the ring, and it calls him the most dominant performer in WWE. And Orton then basically goes on a tirade about nostalgia and legacy. Of course, damn, I forgot the line he said, but it was some people confuse nostalgia with legacy, or he said something to that effect. And I kind of chuckled because I was thinking he was referencing his old faction Legacy, with Ted DiBiase Jr. and Cody Rhodes. And he started, talking up what he did to Edge and Christian, basically glorifying it until he was interrupted by the Big Show. And says he won't let Flair and Orton glorify what they've done. Instead, he intends to vilify them for what they have done. And he says he'll make Orton pay for what he did. And he used to have respect for Flair, but now he lost that because Flair would sink to such depths for Randy Orton. I mean, why are you surprised? He's not the dirtiest player in the game because he kisses babies and hugs puppies. But yeah. Show then basically starts calling Randy Orton out on all of his shortcomings as far as motivation and discipline, and he'll basically take the chance away from Edge to take out Randy Orton. Orton then talks about how him and Big Show are friends, and calling him a future Hall of Famer and a legend. Then Orton says Show could suffer the same fate as Edge and Christian, which Big Show has had enough. He's ready to square up to Orton. Orton says, "Oh no, you're not going to lay a hand on Ric Flair," and then two of them just bolt while Big Show is just jaw jacking. And then Orton just ghoulish lingering threat, basically says, whatever happens to the Big Show next is on him. Next, we had Women's Tag Team Championship action as Bayley and Sasha Banks, Sasha Banks and Bayley Dose Straps took on the Iconics. This was a short match, but Sasha Banks got the victory over Peyton Royce with a bank statement. Afterwards, basically, Sasha Banks starts off by saying she's jealous of Bayley and her two belts, and says she's going to start going after some singles goal of her own. And there's the whole, oh, she's getting ready to drop the bomb. She's like, well, at Extreme Rules, I'm challenging Asuka for the Raw Women's Championship, and it's just swerve. Asuka then comes to the ring and basically accept her challenge, but then she winds up on the business end of a 2-on-1 beatdown. As the attack finished with Sasha Banks locking the bank statement on Asuka. Almost done, I swear. This was a big one. These show notes are all over the place. Anyway, next we had an interview with MVP and Bob Lashley. Basically, Lashley saying that it's R-Truth's fault that he's not WWE champion. And MVP said, now that Lashley's free of distractions, he's going to start gunning what. Now that Lashley is free of distractions, his client is free of distractions, he's going to start pursuing Apollo Crews as another client. Build him a nice clientele. I'm all for an MVP-led faction, honestly. But, basically says he could help Apollo Crews become one of the greatest United States champions ever because he himself is one of the longest reigning WWE United States champions. Next, we had a small backstage segment as Liv Morgan's walking through the back. Ruby Riott tries to console her or tries to talk with her, and Liv Morgan's like, listen, I just lost a match. I've been through a lot of crap. I don't need you to make me feel any worse. Next, we had another edition of MVP's VIP Lounge, where big things happening, big things popping, little things stopping. And he calls out Apollo Crews, and Apollo Crews humors him. Listens to what he's got to say. MVP talks about how he's gained new respect for Apollo Crews and says he wants to help Crews become one of the best. And basically, Apollo Crews said, "Listen, I told you once, I'll tell you again. No, I'm only out here to humor you, so maybe you'll get the point." And he says he's accomplished a lot without MVP's help, and he's going to keep doing it without MVP's help. And he says that neither MVP or the championship is going to change Apollo Crews any more than who he is. And MVP basically handed the same threat to Apollo Crews that he handed to Drew McIntyre. Basically, he will be the reason why Apollo Crews loses the United States Championship. And that leads Shelton Benjamin out, who was going to face Apollo Crews later on in the night. And basically, Apollo Crews falls to a 2-on-1 beatdown by MVP and Shelton Benjamin. And then MVP just kind of gives him some free advice. Basically says, tip number one, don't ever let yourself get led into a 2-on-1 situation. That nugget was free. The next one's going to cost you. And these two put on one hell of a match as Apollo Crews and Shelton Benjamin went at it after the commercial break. Of course, Apollo Crews got the victory with the toss powerbomb for the 3 count. As soon as the match is over, Bob Lashley comes in, locks in that full Nelson, and forces Apollo Crews to just pass out. Next, we had Rey and Dominic Mysterio airing their father-son scolding session in the ring. Rey basically said, "I was scared because I didn't know where you went. I didn't know what you were doing. And then I was even more scared because you had went to Raw to confront Seth and his goons. But I was proud at the way you handled yourself, how you got out of there. But I'm angry that you did something foolish." And basically, Dominic's response was, "Well, I had to do it. This is a united front between, this is a family affair." And, he basically said Seth Rollins will learn that this family fights together. Because, Ray then makes the point saying it's his turn to fight for Dominic, and he wants his pound of flesh against Seth Rollins, which that prompted the Monday Night Rollins. There we go, Monday Night Rollins, the Monday Night Messiah, to roll out there. And he says Dominic and Ray have put him in a very interesting position, and he says fate has brought all of them together. And speaking of all of them together, Murphy and Austin Theory join Rollins as they make their way to the ring, and that leads to a 3-on-2 beatdown until Humberto Carrillo and Aleister Black made the save. Of course, getting their pound of flesh on Theory and Murphy, as all, 2, 5, 7 men got to scrapping. Of course, there was a segment where Murphy and Theory had managed to fend off Carrillo and Black, and were holding Dominic, forcing him to watch. They were forcing him to watch as Rollins tried to take out Rey Mysterio's good eye until Black and Carrillo made the save. You know, just sending I'm sorry, my bad. Ray and Dominic were trying to put out Seth Rollins' one of his eyes until Murphy and Theory got the better of the exchange, and Aleister Black and Humberto Carrillo drove them off. So yeah, that's how we kicked off Monday Night Raw with the baby faces standing tall. Sorry, I'm having a bad memory of what happened on Monday Night Raw. All I remember was it was a really good segment. You know what else is really good? Rod's podcast, Prime Talk with Rodimus Prime on the Castbox app. Go check it out. Anyway, that being said, I'm War Machine MJ. This has been 3 Count. You guys have been lovely, and I'll see you guys later. Ba bang.